How's it going, guys? It's been quite a while since we've had a new banner. I think last time was Texas Alter, right? And then after then we've had IS3 that was released with Texas Alter, and then CC and some event reruns. So I hope you guys have been having fun with those. I definitely have been, especially with IS3. I even hosted a Surging Waves 15 tournament. That was really fun. Had a lot of people coming and watch. So that was really nice. And I was like, okay, here we have a new banner. So maybe I should go back to my roots and make a Shiju pool video. I've had my fun with IS3. Time to go back to my proper work. So here we are, a Shiju pool video for Reed the Flame Shadow. I'll just call her Reed Alter from now on because the full name is a bit too lengthy. So the question of Shiju pool Flame Alter banner. The short answer is yes, you definitely should. And I would say that even though, yes, we are going to get a limited banner really soon, according to our 3-month gap between limited operators, I would still recommend, even if you don't have that much pools, I would still recommend going for a single 6-star at least to see if you can get her rate up. If you get an off banner, that's just tough luck, and then you can just skip it. But I would say just go for her once. Unless you have a very specific plan of you just got into Arknights and you want to get someone with from the banner, let's say Summer Chen, and you just want to have 300 pulls for that, then maybe you don't have to. But for everyone else, I would highly recommend trying to get a copy of Reed Alter. And let's go into why that is the case. So Reed Alter is an incantation medic, so just like Hibiscus Alter. So I don't know how many of you remember, but back when Hibiscus Alter was introduced into the game, I actually talked about that. I recommended everyone not to level Reed Alter. No, I mean Hibiscus Alter, because I said there was someone that was going to be way better to use than Hibiscus Alter. So I just told you guys, well, just don't bother with her. And it was Reed Alter that I was talking about back then. And I guess I should really introduce you guys to what this archetype of operator do and what's their weakness and strength, because I guess not many of us has actually used them. So with these type of medic, they deal arch damage, right? And whenever they attack enemies, they will also heal your operators equal to 50% of the damage that Reed Alter has dealt. So obviously you want to level her up as much, and the healing effect isn't really as good, especially when there's no enemy in sight. Then she can't hit anyone, and hence she can't heal anyone. That is kind of the downside of this archetype. But on the contrary of that, her skills and her talents actually make up for that. And in some situations, if you use her skills, she can actually give incredible amount of heal that is uncomparable to other operators. So we'll have to go deeper into that. But the weakness of this class is definitely when there is no enemy in sight, and let's say there's a range attack enemy, or let's say there's a poison AoE damage over time on the field all the time, or let's say if there's those catapult that would just attack you on the field. Under those circumstances, yes, Reed Alter will still die, so I would still highly recommend you to just maybe bring Saria or just another medic just in case Reed Alter dies. But yeah, that's kind of the weakness of this archetype in itself. So her talent: when Reed Alter deals damage to an enemy, there's a 30% chance to inflict Cinder, in which it will apply 20% attack decrease. That is actually very strong. And also it will decrease, it will give enemies 30% of arch fragility. So arch fragility is a new type of arch damage buff that will not stack with each other, with itself, but it can stack with all the arch damage buff that we've ever had in the past. So normal, fragile, and the Saria's arch damage increase and all that good stuff. It will just multiply with each other. So you can think of this not really as a new, but kind of the best of what arch fragility has, because I think we did have another operator with arch fragility. It's just that Reed is just obviously the better choice here. And this will last 6 seconds. And obviously, if you get to P3, this decreased attack and arch fragility will both increase by 2%. So that's minus 22% attack and 32% arch fragility. It's a pretty good thing, because with how damage calculation is done, right? If you decrease enemies attack, by 20%, and then count that after the in-game calculation of, let's say, defense, then that will actually decrease way more damage your operators are taking rather than just decrease 20% damage taken. That is just how the calculation of the damage is worked. So minus 20% attack on enemies, actually really good. Her second talent though is a bit more meh in my opinion, because I've never really felt like I had a use for it. So when Reed Alter heals an ally unit, Reed Alter will also get 50% of the healing effect for herself. It's like, yeah, but meh, because obviously like you want her to hit enemies to heal your operators, right? And so usually I would put Reed Alter more in the front line, so that does increase her chance of getting hit by a bit more than your typical medic, like I would Shining and whatnot. Those two have the same attack area. But also, since I do use Menard quite a lot recently, and Menard just has the taunt, so he kind of takes all the damage. So it's kind of a, yeah, meh, kind of a talent. You can think of it as how you will. I would just say it's a fine to have talent. Now, let's talk about her skills. So, when Reed Alter activates her skill 1, which will last 35 seconds, she will have plus up to 45% attack and plus up to 45 attack speed. I would say this is a very normal skill and normal skill 1, typical skill 1 where it's just like, oh yeah, a bit of buff but doesn't really do anything special. I would just not recommend most people to ever M3 this skill, like unless you're like those super whales and you're just like, I want to M9 all the 6 stars, go ahead. But like for us generic players, just don't bother with it. Just leave it as is and you probably won't ever use it. Before E2 though, you can still kind of use it to hit air units, I guess. But skill 2, that's just because skill 2 doesn't hit air units. And if you really want someone to deal like aerial damage, sure. But why don't you just use a sniper? You know, just bring your cruise. She probably does the job as well. So yeah, skill 1's really limited. Now, let's talk about her skill 2. Skill 2 is a lot more complicated of a skill because it does introduce a new type of mechanic that we've never really seen before. So let's explain it this way. The moment you activate her skill 2, she will apply effect to 2 operators within her attack range, and she will prioritize ground units. So let's say if there's 2 ground units that are deployed earlier and then 2 high range operators that are deployed later in her range, she will prioritize the ground units and apply the effect to the 2 ground units. If there are 3 ground units, then she will apply this effect to the 2 ground units that are deployed later, the latest. Now, what effect does she apply though? What she does is that she will give both of those operators 3 fireballs each, and they will spin around in an orbit surrounding the center of the operator. And the rotating speed is about 2.4 seconds per cycle. And each of those fireballs is its own projectile and has its, how should I say it, effective like triggering area, right? So what it does is it will spin around and hit an enemy and deals 240% of Reed Alter's damage as arcs damage. Reed Alter's attack as arcs damage. And once it hits an enemy, it will have a 1.5 second cooldown before it pops back up and respawns. So potentially you're looking at 50,000 arcs damage with just 1 operator with the fireball spinning around and hitting enemies. And the operator that has the effect, when fireball hits an enemy, that will also apply Reed Alter's healing effect to that operator only. So it doesn't heal other operators surrounding that operator, right? It's just that operator only. So if I put it on Menard is the only operator that will get healed once the fireball hits an enemy. And if you just, you know, just smack 2 operators side by side, like, and then hitting 1 enemy at the same time, well, you'll get double the amount of damage. How much damage is that? 100k. But there is a special situation where if you block the enemy with 1 operator and then just not block the other enemy, so let's say if you have Mizuki, let's say, and then you have let's say another tank, so 2 operators side by side and the enemy is right on top of Mizuki, in that case you can get up to almost 130k damage just from Read Alter alone. We're not counting any of the other damages. But you have to make sure the enemy is blocked but not squeezed out of like the tower. So if the enemy is like moving halfway into the tower and you squeeze it out, that, you know, that kind of screws up with how the mechanic works. So that doesn't really do the job. You have to be blocked, and then the other operator sits on top. So what kind of things you can do with this is, let's say as an example, you block the enemy with, let's say you block a boss with Surtur, right? Who does damage ignoring enemies' resistance, and then you also put on Texas Ultra skill 2, which will decrease the enemy's resistance. With that, you're healing Surtur because the fireball is spinning around hitting the boss, so it heals Surtur by quite a bit of damage because Read Alter is definitely dealing a ton of damage, right? And then you also have Texas decrease the enemy's resistance that also increases Read Alter's damage ability and hence increases her healing ability. So Surtur is getting a ton of heal, and Surtur is also benefiting from the decreased resistance. That combo itself does what, like 300k damage or something like that to an enemy. It is tons of damage from this combo. The downside of this skill is that you have to have 2 melee operators, or at least 2 other operators, or at minimum another operator to, you know, set up the other fireball within Read Alter's attack area, because she can apply the fireball to herself. You need at least 2 operators for like the maximum amount of damage. So it's like those operators that, you know, kind of has to work with other operators, unlike Minar, where you can just string and Minar would just kill everyone. This skill kind of has its weakness, but this is basically the most amount of arch damage you can do. And like I said before, you can stack it with Saria's skill 3. You can also stack it with Fragile, and you can just do a ton of damage really quickly. Apparently with those buffs, you can do like 700k damage or something. It's some absurd number that I probably will never use, but like if you just stack your buff, this is basically the best that you can do. And how I would think about it is I would think of it as kind of like buffing Exia. Yes, my favorite operator, Exia. So you know how like when you're using Exia, when you just stack a lot of buff and you just melt enemy, this is basically what it feels like. So very cool to use, but you gotta have someone else to work with. And like I said before, she does die quite easily if there's someone attacking her. So, you know, it is a bit of a hard skill to use, but if you use it well, it's really strong. Highly recommended to M3. This is actually my favorite skill to use instead of, why didn't I use it as default? Skill 2 is always my default skill. Now, skill 3 of Read Alter is probably the most complicated skill, and no, not the most brain dead skill and the most cool skill. Because I think at this point, many of us have already seen Read skill using skill 3 to just kill a bunch of enemies, and it's like when they die, they will explode and just spread out the damage, and like a bunch of enemies just all die at once. I think everyone has seen that GIF or video before. That's her skill 3. So once you activate Read Alter skill 3, she will be able to hit 2 enemies. She will have plus up to 60% attack, and the chance of her first talent to trigger is increased to 100%. So it will inflict that cinder thing 100% whenever she attacks an enemy. And within the skill duration of 30 seconds, all enemies with cinder will take 60% of Read Alter's attack as arch damage per second, and that will actually affect those enemies that already had cinder before she activated the skill. So those cinders will actually keep going until the end of the skill 3. And once an enemy is killed with cinder, that enemy will explode and deal 140% of Read Alter's attack as arch damage and apply cinder. So that is where you see the spread of cinder effect to like a bunch of enemies, like a freaking chain explosive. And cinder will last till the end of the skill. So let's say if you apply it 5 seconds before cinder's skill 3 activation, that cinder will last 35 seconds. So it is actually quite an impressive skill. But even without those explosions, right, the skill itself actually still deals quite a amount of damage to a single target enemy. but obviously in this case you're really looking forward for that AoE damage effect. So you can think of skill 2 as a single target damage skill and skill 3 as a AoE damage skill. That's basically how I would use these two skills. So in summary, what is Reed Alter? She is a caster that deals more arts damage than all your casters, and she's a medic. Basically that's it. And obviously I have to I forgot to mention, because obviously both of her skill 2 and skill 3 does tons of damage. And remember the trait of this operator, of this class of operator, the more damage they deal, the more they heal. So once you activate skill 2 and skill 3, most of our operators basically won't die. That is why, like, I actually bring Reed Alter a lot more when I'm actually manually playing the game, and I just bring like those traditional medics once I'm actually, like, let's say playing AFK recently now. I just put Reed in my squad like casually, and I just use her as my medic most of the time, because that is just how good she is. She does tons of damage, and she heals by a bunch as well. So that is basically why I would recommend everyone to pull Reed Alter. I would actually really like to show you guys the real use case of Reed Alter, but I think I got a cold or a flu or something. I'm feeling really sick. Like, my throat is feeling really bad as well, so probably won't be able to do that. And so I guess maybe I will do a stream later on to show you guys how good she works, especially in IS3. I do want to stream more IS3 down the road. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to follow my Twitch. And I guess that's about it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.